The objective of these sessions is to share a commercialization roadmap and allow you to understand the stages and steps that you should be following when commercializing your innovative idea, your product or service. And it's our aim to give you the tools and insights needed to minimize the risk associated with bringing your innovation to market. We know statistically that more than 80% of innovations fail, and it's our intent to improve the success rate for all innovators. And in our previous webinar, we highlighted the need of understanding the market and the specific need for your customers. We touched on some of the specific data science tools that are available today. I'm your host, Marcus van Vugt, and in today's session, we'll be taking the first steps on the innovation roadmap, which you'll see behind me. Trevor Holmes, Managing Director at Vivo ICP, will discuss the need for a conceptual phase, which is the initial stage of understanding and scoping your idea. I'm also joined by Mark Portbury, CEO of a new software business, Hiro, or Hiro if you take the Japanese meaning, who will be discussing what his business achieved by undertaking the conceptualization process and how it helped to initially validate that there was an opportunity to pursue the commercialization of his technology. So welcome, Mark. I'd like to begin by acknowledging the traditional owners of the land on which we meet, and I pay respects to elders past, present, and emerging. We have some time at the end for questions from the audience, so please use the chat function and we'll monitor that as we go along. Now, Trevor, if we can start with you, can you explain what a conceptualization process is and what the benefits are that it provides?
Thanks, Marcus. Welcome, everyone. Yes, look, the benefits are really established around making sure that you don't dive in and spend all your money and not having done the process of, first of all, just conceptualizing what the opportunities are out there and what that commercialization roadmap might look like. Marcus, I might just share a couple of dot points that would be good for people to take on board as they go through this particular process. So really,
you've got show and tell privileges, so there you go.
There we go. Has that come up now?
Yep.
Excellent. So I think the first thing really to understand is that there are validation points. As you can see behind Marcus, we have the roadmap there, and there really are key validation points that you want to be able to tick off before you go investing and spending your hard-earned cash and getting your idea to the market. And the idea then is, really just to save you money, because we see far too often customers or clients that come to us that have gone away and spent a lot of money building their idea and then come to us at the point where they've tried to go out to the market and haven't been able to get adoption. And really, it's sort of too late for us to help them at that particular point in time, in most cases. So the idea of just doing a conceptual process is to be able to look at what are those validations and how do you get the validation points, particularly what is the market opportunity technically, can your idea be done, what's the sort of business model, and we'll go through a few more of those things. The process really is about validating those conceptual ideas and making sure that we, validate each step so that we know that it is worthy for us to continue on into the next step. So within this validation process in the conceptualization phase, what we're talking about is, who do we think is our target market? What do we actually know about them? And why is it that they might want to buy your innovative solution? What is it about them that they want, need, value, and in your innovative idea? in many cases, we actually go right deep when we're workshopping these sort of things. We go deeply into understanding what is the job to be done, what is the job that the client is trying to get done, that they've got a problem with, in which your idea could be a solution. And we'll keep saying it over and over again. The more you actually get that right, the more you nail it, the more probability that you're going to succeed. But in this stage, it's really just about conceptualizing what some of these ideas are. We're also, when we're analyzing markets and, making a commitment that we think that segment of the market is our target, we're making a lot of assumptions. And it's really important to document these assumptions, because as you go into the next phases, you want to test these assumptions, literally by talking to people. And, certainly when we do it in a very scientific manner. But even if you're a startup with, very little funding at this particular stage, you are at least better off talking to some people within that target market to validate some of those assumptions that you've made in the conceptual phase. We also want to know about our competitors. Now, a lot of people come to us and say, well, we don't actually have any competitors. What we're doing is so unique that, we don't have competitors. Well, you may be right in looking at that from a position of exact to exact, but remember, come back to job to be done. That job is being done somehow now, and that is actually your competitor. But also, we want to understand what else are we competing against. Sometimes your innovation is so out there that it requires an educational process. The market won't quite understand the benefits that your solution brings to them. So that, in fact, is a competitive barrier that you need to be able to break through. The more you can understand about what are the competitive forces that you're up against, the more you can actually define the strategies you need to overcome those. And it's always best to do this in the conceptual phase. Also looking at, well, what's the business model? We've done a project over the last couple of years where initially we started off with that model being a manufacturing and full global distribution. But our contingency was that it was a licensing model. Now, unfortunately, on that particular project, with the COVID pandemic, it greatly affected the position. But because we had that contingency, we took that next step, and that particular client ended up getting a license out of selling their IP on a licensing royalty basis to a company in Israel, who has now taken that global, and it is going to do very, very well. So, do understand the business models, and also what does that launch formula, the map behind Marcus, what does it look like for you? What are all the different stages you're going to need to go through? And, while that framework is good for looking across, a good disciplined approach to launching innovative ideas, of course, each individual project has its own elements that you need to be able to flush out. And again, it's better off doing that in this conceptual phase. In the end, what we come up with is, by way of estimation, is looking at that roadmap and going, well, what sort of legal services will I need? How much are they likely to cost? How will I get a brand out there? What's the minimum viable product or lean way I can get a brand? How much is that likely to cost? If I have to build prototypes, getting an idea of what those things are going to cost. And then on the revenue side, it's like, well, what would we likely be charging for this product? What is the cost of goods sold? So what's our margin in the end? And can you demonstrate, even conceptually, that it does look promising, that there is a rate of return on your investment that you can get? So Marcus, that's probably just a couple of key things to go through and make sure that when we're looking at that roadmap, that we know what the steps are and we've really validated how we're going to go through each of those steps.
So, specific question, Trevor, on that. Now, you might have clients come to you going, I've already got this idea, I've developed a product. How do I then actually continue on the path that I've been doing? What's your message that you want to portray?
It really is that launching any innovative product or service is a risky business. And what we do know is that when people follow the launch formula, as they're validating along each particular step and not going out and just spending hundreds of thousands of dollars of building it and then coming back and going, well, where do I go to sell this? They actually do that in a step-by-step process. Excuse me. But what you can see slightly behind Marcus is that the risk is greatest in the early stages. But because you are following the launch formula, then as you are validating as you go along, the risks are actually diminishing. And so by the time you enter the market, you deeply understand the market, the competitive nature, and also all the bases of which you can enter the market and get adoption, which is the primary, objective in the very early phases.
Thanks, Trevor. I might ask Mark to sort of have a few words, because Mark has undertaken a number of product development aspects. Thank you for joining us, Mark. And I understand your technology was something built over a period of 10 years to solve a problem within the company of your then company, Saunders Havel. For those of you who don't know, Saunders Havel is a multidisciplined town planning, surveying, and environmental business. So I assume you knew you had a product that worked, was developed internally, and it was working for your core business. What was it that prompted you to seek out help to identify whether there was an opportunity to commercialize?
Yeah, thanks, Marcus, and I appreciate the invite to come and join the discussion today. I'm glad to be here to share my journey. I've actually just gone back and looked through, going back through that early work that I started with Trevor, and it's been a great journey. Going back to 2019 was when we first met and started working on this. And yeah, we started that process with Trevor of having something that we thought worked really well in our business. But it was absolutely something that we had built for us. We'd never thought about it being a commercial product. It was never designed to be something to be sold externally. But we'd just been consistently sort of getting this feedback internally from employees, from our clients who might have looked over the shoulder and saw what was on our screen with our product that was just called Intranet at the time. And they're like, oh, this looks really good. What is this? Can you show me more? So we consistently kept getting this feedback around, how good this thing was that we'd built internally. So we sort of thought, well, there's something in this. There's something in this story of people consistently giving this feedback. Maybe we need to explore it further. But we were quite a mature business at Saunders Havel at the time, and already had quite a mature product set. And building software was not our core business. It wasn't the thing that we made our bread and butter on. It sort of was born out of a need internally, but with no vision to then want to suddenly turn it into something to make money off. So we did sort of then think about, okay, we're going to need some help here of how do we take what we've built and test, is this thing actually, is it actually going to have a market out there? Because we knew that whilst we'd had the feedback from internally and from some people externally, it was still a bit of a gut feel at that point of, does the market actually really need this thing? And we had heard anecdotally that, yeah, if you're going to launch software out in the marketplace, be ready to spend some money. So yeah, we brought Trevor and his team on board to help us really answer that question of, is the feedback that we're getting now, is it just, yeah, this is great, it's nice to have, but it's really only solving our business's problem, and that's going to be the end of the story? Or does this thing actually have legs, and can we take it somewhere into the marketplace?
And what was the biggest insight that you gained as going through that initial phase? As I understand, you had a number of ideas in mind when you started the journey. Can you take us through some of that experience?
Yeah, we actually came to Trevor with 3 ideas, was what we were originally asking for advice on. So it was the current software that we're now launching to the market in its commercial version as Hiro. But we had 2 other innovations inside our business that we just wanted to test to see what does that look like as an externally commercialized product. So we had one product that was a mapping orientated product that was about analysis of land data using some cool visualizations. And we had another product that was again in the software spectrum, but it was around doing analysis of land using various inputs from different databases, and then turning that into something that then gives meaning to whether land is viable for development. So we went through the process for all 3 of the projects. And I think probably one of the really core lessons that we learned out of that process was the question of scalability. That was such a really important milestone for us in our thinking of whether we wanted to start this journey or not. The 2 projects that the other projects that we didn't end up then doing further work with, they're still products that we're still working on, we're still selling, we're still continuing that innovation process, but we're not looking to scale it. We're not looking to add serious big investments to try and build this thing up. Whereas the advice that we got on our intranet at the time, now Hiro, was this is something that there is market demand for. There's a particular market demand for. That was really critical, understanding what does that market sector look like, because we had no idea who was going to want to buy this thing. And it is something that definitely not only has an opportunity to scale. We'd only been thinking about Queensland, let alone even thinking about Australia and internationally. But it was that level of an analysis that we got early on to say that, yeah, there was an opportunity to scale this thing right through to the international stage. It's a long journey and it's going to take a lot of work to get there, but there's a level of science in what that journey going forward would be to help us get to that point.
Okay, so looking back at that journey and looking at the challenge to scale, what were the most valuable aspects of that upfront work, do you think? And then coming back, where do you think you are at now in terms of the whole commercialization journey?
I think definitely getting an understanding of the market segment was really important. I think probably when we looked to, back in 2019 when we were making the decision of whether to go or no go, our business was, a relatively larger business at that point. We had about 70 to 80 odd employees. So we were sort of a bit stuck. It's a bit of a forest for the trees moment. We were stuck in thinking about our own environment and trying to sell, well, if this thing is working for a business like ours, we need to sell it to businesses like ours. Whereas really, that was sort of the bit of the light bulb moment of that early stage, was that no, it's probably not going to be a great market entry strategy of trying to go for businesses like us, because their needs are going to be quite sophisticated, and they're going to expect all the bells and whistles from day one. Whereas the advice that we got was focus on a particular segment, the 5 to 20 employee range, and really get an understanding of that market and really get a feel for what are the pains and the needs and the wants in that particular segment to help focus where we're going to take this thing forward. So there was a lot of really valuable insights that we got out of that process, a lot of great material around what is the size of that market, what are the dollars in that market, what are the attributes of that market, that really gave us clarity that we could then have some confidence in knowing that, yeah, it might not have been what we thought was the right entry point going for people like us, but there's a great opportunity for a smaller customer size to be able to launch a product into that may not have that really high level of sophistication requirement, and are going to help us build that journey up in a more sustainable long-term model.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. I might just ask Trevor a quick question based on that. Trevor, Mark highlighted that they had some particular ideas and they wanted to go forward. In your experience, how much time and energy do you spend at that conceptual phase to really explore what people have already put on the table, as well as then saying, okay, well, here are the challenges, and you want to scale in this, and that's where you need to go, versus look, the market's not really going to go, and people will have an emotional tie into it, right? We all know that you've created something, you're proud of it, you want to put it into market, you believe everybody will want to buy it. How do you deal with the challenges of that emotional buy-in with the practicality of this is really what the market's telling you?
Yeah, great question. I wasn't really prepared for this one, Marcus, but it's a great question, because what we're talking about is the emotional tie to, particularly innovators who are very creative and so on. But we're in the business of de-risking this whole journey, through to the market. My perception is that many people totally underestimate just what that journey's, how long and involved it is, but also the costs involved. So we literally work on science. Now, beginning in this conceptual phase, which is the topic of this particular episode, we're sort of making assumptions, and we're using our best knowledge, some simple research methodologies and so on, without spending the bigger dollars that come and using the science a bit later on. But the investment is very worthwhile up front, and we've had some clients that have gone through that particular process with us, realized how much effort and money that they may risk going into something like this, and have actually refrained or even pivoted their business models so that they build it to a point, if it's a technology or something like that, they might patent the idea, and then we can go to distributors or global wholesalers with the idea now that it's protected, and get them to take on the licensing, and they've got much more money and power distribution to be able to do so. But in summary, to be specific about your question, it is about decoupling yourself from the emotion and truly understand, is there a market who want, need and value this, and can we validate that initially just in the first phases of how big is that market, what are the assumptions we're making, some simple conversations to at least validate at that conceptual stage that it is worth now spending a bit more money to actually do much deeper, what we call qualitative research in talking to many more people in a scientific way.
Yeah, thanks, Trevor. I might open it up to the floor if anybody's got any questions for either Mark or Trevor in terms of that commercialization roadmap and particularly that conceptual work that we do. I haven't seen anything come through the chat, but if anybody'd like to just unmute themselves and throw some difficult questions at Trevor and some easy ones at Mark, that would be fantastic.
And certainly while people are thinking about that, Marcus, I'd have to say that in Mark's, situation, yes, they did have these three, great technologies. But for any organization, to take on multiple projects at once, you're spending money and it is so easy to get this wrong. And I think the thing that has come, from Mark and his fellow directors' perspective is that they've been very disciplined in following the process and ensuring that things are being validated along the way, and really not being emotionally attached. And I know Mark is really emotionally attached to this because it's his baby. He's built this thing himself. And when we took it to some software developers, external, to assess it, they came back and said, wow, this has been exceptionally well architecturally and engineering design from a platform perspective. And it made their job so much easier to help Mark now move this into the cloud environment. But yeah, it's from the Mark's fellow directors and the way they've approached it. They're doing it in a good scientific, following a formula, and it has resulted in certainly some challenges along the way, hasn't there, Mark? But because we know what we're measuring against and what we need to get to before pulling the next stage, the trigger for the next stage, it's helped keep everyone focused on what the project objectives are in each stage.
Sure.
Yeah, I think you've got the key word there for me, Trevor, is validation. That's been really a really important thing for us, to allow us to mitigate risk in the process, because it's the way that on reflection how we've gone about it, with the advice we've had, we've gone through. It's not just one point of validation; it's continually revalidating based on the position that we're at, and using the inputs and the science at the time of what we have to be able to make a go no go decision on the current point. Do we proceed to the next point? Do we continue to the next stage? So that's been really critical for us, and I guess it's a bit of help in trying to take what is an enormously complicated journey to get to this point that we're at now, and we're still going forward with. But it really helps break the process up into manageable parts of, okay, what is our immediate problem? And what are the inputs that can help us make that next decision? What are the market factors that we have available to us? What are the business models that are available to us that can take us to that next step? And using the inputs to be able to then make an informed decision around, okay, are we going to proceed or not?
And did you find, Mark, that you backtracked a little bit on decisions from time to time as you go through the various stages, or was it you were comfortable with where you're at?
Yeah, look, it's every point you've sort of got to stop and reflect and think about the position that you're at. And there's been multiple points, multiple gates through the process so far, where at each point we've made a decision. Are we continuing or are we stopping? And we've tried to really enforce that discipline of trying to particularly for me who's built this thing, take the emotion out of it. And as much as I love writing the code and building the next great feature set, just validating, well, is someone going to actually want to buy that thing, and is it going to work outside of the current environment that we've got this thing in? So I don't think, on reflection, we've done any backtracking to answer your question, but I think that's a good thing, because going back means you're spending more money to redo what you've already done, and having the discipline of having the gates and stopping and taking the inputs, taking the advice, taking all of the information available to you before making that next leap means that you execute once. Of course you learn, and of course you have your things that you go, okay, I think this is how it's going to work out before we take that next step. But it's an educated decision. It's not just having a stab at it, which has been helpful for us.
Cool. Thanks, Mark. Hamed, you've got your hand up.
Yes. First of all, thank you, Marcus, Trevor, and Mark. I think that was a very good presentation and the points together. I just wanted to have one point, not really a question, back to the points that Trevor made about competitions and the market. I think, we came across the same things from the customers that we're working with in the product developments, and lots of them I came across, they say, oh, we got a great idea that there's nothing like it in the market. And most of the time I would say that that's not really a good thing necessarily, because I believe it's important in that process of validations to make sure that your product has got market. And sometimes competitors is good, because that's, as they're saying, the competition is validation. It tells you that someone's already selling something similar to your product, so already there is a market. And I think that validation is very important. I just wanted to emphasize in that, as it's important things to make sure that before we start spending any time and money on developments, we already know that we can sell the product.
Cool.
Well said.
Thanks, Hamed. Any other questions from anybody? Going once, going twice, third and final time. All right. So, Mark and Trevor, thank you for your participation today and sharing your understanding of the process to date and the conceptual workshop content and the purpose and everything else that provides in terms of understanding the market. As I mentioned at the outset, this webinar is the second of a series where we'll take people through effectively the launch formula, which is, how do you get from A to B? How do you get out there in the market with your innovation and commercializing successfully? And our next session is going to be on the 20th of July, where we'll start looking at how do we develop a comprehensive business case. So I'm really looking forward to that, and some of the elements, and particularly the data science tools that support and validate some of those criteria. Now, I do have, actually, Trevor, do you want to make the announcements, or would you like me to, in terms of upcoming events for people might be interested in? You're on mute. Now you have to pay everybody drinks.
More, yeah, it gets expensive on this, doesn't it? Yeah, look, no, I'm more than happy for you to share those, okay. Marcus. I might just pop in and say a couple of things on each of them, but yeah, no, you go for it.
Yeah, so for some of you that may know, we have an association with a software development house out of Kiev, and then tomorrow at 3:30 we're facilitating quite a prestigious event as far as I'm concerned. I think it's really important. And it's recognising the Australian tech industry stepping up for Ukraine. We're going to have, the people from Ukraine that we work with. Trevor will talk to them, and not only how they continue to deliver in the current market to Australian customers, but also to their international customers under their very challenging situation. We'll have the Ukrainian ambassador to Australia hopefully addressing us. I know he's a very popular person at the moment, and he's given us some time to join us. We'll also Actually, do you want to put the link in the chat room, Trevor, whilst
That's
we're
a
here?
great idea. I'll do that.
We're doing it through Eventbrite, and we're charging $20, all of which will go to Australia for UNHCR in their Ukrainian appeal. Now, next month is World Refugee Day, where Australia for UNHCR seeks to raise several $100,000 in part of that program as well. So I'll be contributing all of that to that charity. I think we'll be recording it, so if you can't make it, we'll do a playback for people who are interested. And secondly, we've also got another event on the 27th of June between 12 for midday and 1:30 p.m. 15 years of quantitative research found that success of failure in products and startup and acquisitions is highly predictive. And we've got a gentleman, data science expert, Thomas Thurston, who led the research at Internal Capital and Harvard Business School, I'm just going to share really a science-based approach and the data science tools that he creates. And he'll introduce it to some of the specific tools in there. It's effectively the equivalent of a Moneyball type system, right? So you do a comparative of all these data points and come up, and the one of the largest capital investors actually use the system to choose who they're going to invest in. They don't actually listen to pitches anymore. They just take the numbers and go, yep, this is a good deal based on the throughput of what the market's telling us, and that's how they make their investment. So he's going to take us through some really unique technologies that he has. We're very fortunate to have Thomas with us, and it'll be really, really good to see everybody there. But for the rest, Trevor, anything to add? Otherwise, we'll call it a day.
No, I think you've done very well. I think
Cool.
both events are extremely important. And if anyone listening here now knows of other people, please share the link. It's really about just raising as much money as we can, but also hearing about Michael's story and how we can actively help, particularly in this case, Ukrainian software developers. And yeah, Thomas is a do not miss. Lock it out now, 27th of June. It'll be at 12 o'clock till about 1:30. Lock it out in your diaries, because we'll be sharing it. We hope to have the event out on Eventbrite by, middle of next week at some stage. So yeah, it is really exciting, and we're very privileged to have him here. Thank you, Catherine.
Thanks, everybody, and hopefully we'll see you in the next one. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you, Marcus.
Thanks, everyone.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you.